Hi, love. Welcome to Soften Up with Krista Alexandria. I'm so glad you're here. This corner of the world, I hope to be just a really soft place to land, a place where you can reconnect with yourself. My hope is that these conversations really plant a new seed of what might else be possible in a world that really makes us harden and put up our masks just to get through it. I want this to be a mask-free zone for you, and my opportunity is to meet you in that space too. Today, we are talking about hormones. I have recently been so humbled by hormones, let me tell you, in my just broadening understanding of how much of our lives, our emotions, how we feel about ourselves, all come back to these tiny invisible things called hormones. So something very important to start with is that I am not a medical professional. I don't quest to be. I've never been one. My intention is to really speak from just personal experience because anecdotal shares, storytelling, candid, open conversations is only just happening in our generation for the first time in modern times. I'm sure Indigenous communities had much more awareness and infrastructure to support women going through perimenopause and the menopausal shift. But honey, we don't have that. Hopefully, a conversation like this is contributing to a modern expression of that. But really, I'm here to share because I thought I was way too young to be experiencing what I was experiencing with hormonal shifts. The changes in my body over the last, really, when I started to backtrack it over the last 5 years, now 6 years, it all tracks with perimenopausal symptoms. And I just didn't even know until probably 38, 39 that anything I was experiencing in my body that really stood out as like, that's weird. That's really challenging. What the hell's going on? I did not know to think perimenopause about it. So I'm sharing from that space of, and it would have been really nice to know when I was going through that, that that's what it was, and that there's support around it, that it's actually a quote unquote normal process of this transition happening in my body. And frankly, we deserve better as women and bodies that have uteruses and a reproductive cycle, because this should be something that there is all the care, all the support, all the understanding around. And we're starting just so far behind the eight ball of no cause of our own. It is more so a culture, very patriarchal culture, that has not studied women's bodies. Money hasn't been put towards research. There's no education in medical programs around this, let alone in the everyday experience. Like, we're not talking with our mothers and our aunties and our grandmothers about their perimenopausal and menopausal experiences because they didn't even know that they were having it. So let's talk. If you would have told me that I would be on hormonal therapy, hormone replacement therapy at 40 years old, I would have been like, huh? What? What now? Why? Anytime that I have recently opened up with my friends about this too, they're like, aren't you really young? Like, why? What? And I'm like, I thought so too. And I eventually came to the point of seeking out some support from an OBGYN that specializes in women's health and perimenopause and menopause, just to check myself of like, is this real? Is this normal? Is this timely? I don't know. Well, I do know now. And it is completely within reason for this to be happening. I don't know exactly if I'm early or if this is totally normal for this point, and maybe we just haven't known to call it that. We're not tracking symptoms through a lens of like, man, that could potentially change for the better. So I'm still finding my way through it. I am not here to give medical advice, but I am here to just talk about it, because maybe you're experiencing something similar. Maybe you have a woman in your life or somebody going through a hormonal change in your life where they might be open to the conversation to have with them. And you can maybe also seek out support to help you regulate and balance them as well. Okay, so at 38, I started noticing changes, primarily in my sleep. I could not get through the night. I was having trouble falling asleep. I'm a very light sleeper, so I would get woken up and not be able to fall back asleep. So I was perpetually awake. It felt like between the 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., mostly 2 to 4, 2 to 5, 3 to 5, 3 to 6 sometimes. It was so exhausting and so frustrating, truly. And so I started myself on melatonin. That worked for a little bit until it doesn't. If you've ever used it, that's what our body does. We regulate to it. Plus, I now understand that maybe it robs your body of its ability to generate its own melatonin. Don't quote me on that, but I started to move away from melatonin. Okay. Then I started learning about the power of magnesium, and I incorporated magnesium glycinate into the picture. That was through the help of a functional medicine doctor I work with. Shout out to Dr. Jen. I'm so grateful to have her in my corner. She has been so incredibly validating and supportive through these exact years from like 38 to 41, which I am now 41. So the sleep temporarily got better. It wasn't great. I started to notice that I was having an easier time sleeping during my follicular and ovulation times. And then come luteal phase of my cycle, that's when I was really feeling like I could not get through the night. Oh my God. Some nights I would be up all night. And let me tell you, if I had any form of caffeine, this was around the same time that even dark chocolate in the latter half of the day would be too caffeinated and it would keep me up. Oh, chocolate. You know, even decaf coffee was giving me issues. So if that gives you any idea. Woof. So the sleep started to change. I was super sensitive to caffeine. And of course, with sleep changes come your energy level changes. It was just all over the place, from 38 to 39, definitely into 40 as well. And then I also started learning that perimenopause can start to happen between 35 and 45. And so I'm like, that's interesting. I gained 40 pounds in 2020, which I just chalked up to the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? I also had gone through a terrible breakup in 2019. So the compounding of 2019 and 2020 was just like a wreck for my body. So I'm like, that's interesting that this weight gain happened at 35 and 36. I'm like, okay. And then by 38, I'm having all these sleep issues, which if you've ever learned about, when and how weight loss happens in the body, it's primarily at night when you're sleeping, when all the body's repairing and resting. So then this past year, while I was 40, I just turned 41 in January. During my 40th year is when things started to really just become so loud when it came to discomfort, pain, and all kinds of other symptoms. I just could not believe how many changes were happening simultaneously in my body. So frustrating. So I'm going to read through the list of perimenopause symptoms that I was having. And I'm curious if you spot any that are familiar to you, and also know that perimenopause and menopause symptoms can be so vast. They effectively, what I've learned is that through perimenopause, there is a gradual lowering of estrogen. And through recent research in the past 5 to 10 years, it's been understood now that there are estrogen receptors all over our body. So this long list of possible symptoms makes all the more sense through that lens, because as estrogen drops, estrogen is protective against inflammation. So as estrogen drops, that protection against inflammation lowers. And so we get this rise in these inflammatory symptoms. The greatest teacher that I have learned from has gained such notoriety in the last 2 years. Her name is Dr. Mary Claire Haver. Definitely find her on Instagram at Dr. Mary Claire. Her content is incredible. And once you start following her, be sure to follow all of the other doctors that she interacts with, gets interviewed by, and does interviews on her podcast. Her podcast is called Unpaused, and it's just been life changing. This woman has changed my life. And there's a whole wave of, especially female doctors, of course, who are advocating for all of us women and folks going through this to normalize what the heck we're dealing with, and to also get ourselves support and care. we don't have to settle for just this overall decline in estrogen and progesterone and other hormones that deeply affect our everyday lives. We don't have to just settle for that anymore. And they're the ones at the forefront of educating other doctors, of advocating with insurance companies, with changing black box labels for estrogen, which is a whole thing. You should definitely look that up. Black box on estrogen hormones. And most of all, they are not settling for not knowing anymore. It's amazing. I'm so grateful to be in this time where these women are speaking so loudly, and I am hearing it. I am eating it up. I am here for it. Okay, so I've got this long list just accumulating throughout my 40th year. Here was the list of symptoms that I was noticing happening. The number one top loudest one that got really, really bad just in the last couple months was lower body joint pain. I could not believe how much pain my knees and my ankles and my feet were in. And there came this day where I was working like part-time at a cafe through the holidays, newly opened. I'm like, I've got some space and time. I would love to help out. I was doing max 4 hours on my feet. And I am telling you, the radiating pain that I had going on. There was one day where I came home, laid in bed for literal hours. I got home maybe at like 4. I was in bed the entire night, and the pain kept radiating like fire going up my legs. And that was it. I'm just like, this is not normal. I am 40 years old. I should not be in radiating leg pain after just being on my feet for 4 hours, walking and standing. Like, I was walking and standing. And what also was compounding is that I wasn't able to work out. The not working out for me is not an option. Just from the mental health and wellness standpoint, I'm obviously a person that very much values her health and invests a lot into it. And also last year, I started a GLP-1 to help with metabolic health, to bring my inflammation down, to try and finally get this weight off my body. If you know, you know, I was doing everything. I'm extremely athletic. I eat so well. I've been working with my functional doctor for over 2 years, and that's not the first functional doctor I've been working with. I have invested so much, and I just couldn't move the needle. There's also some high cholesterol happening and things like that. So through a lot of personal resistance towards getting on a med like that, and then through the recommendation of actually multiple doctors that I was a very good candidate for it, I started on this. So it was also a consideration that could that also possibly be contributing to this joint pain? Like maybe it's causing inflammation. I'm the rare example of that happening. I was willing to question it all. So where I went next was my wife had gotten on hormones in the last year as well and really liked the doctor, which, by the way, if we would put my list of symptoms and her list of symptoms together, the list would like double in length because they were completely different. There was maybe, there's overlap on brain fog and things like that, but it is amazing how it's expressing in her and me, and it's just different. Okay, back to the list. Your girl's getting off track. Okay, the lower body pain, joint pain, was really terrible. And because I was on the GLP-1, it runs a risk if you don't actively build muscle to lose muscle. And that compounded with lowering estrogen, which also causes that side effect of losing muscle over time. Not working out was not an option. So I had to take action. I had to figure this out. So I reached out to the OBGYN that my wife used. She already had said, she's like, you're going to love her. She's amazing. And I was just so proud of my wife also for seeking out support for herself, because I guess, to be honest, it's easy, especially as women in this broken, pathetic healthcare system that we settle for and tolerate, because that's what the option is in this country. It's really easy to gaslight yourself because we've been gaslit for how long about our symptoms, right? If you're somebody with PCOS, endometriosis, period pain, you know what I'm talking about. So I really had the blessing of a way in to a professional that I knew did this work, was very good at it. Somebody close to me already had success with it. And so I came on knocking on her door, and the appointment went so well. Back to the list. Okay, back to the list. I included the 40-pound weight gain since 2020. I would have occasional heart palpitations. Menstrual migraines were kicking up in a huge way. Not fun. I have had those since I think those started in college. But as I improved my diet and lowered inflammation, those did get better, but they were back. Misophonia, I think that's how you pronounce it, where the sound of people eating like profoundly grosses you out. That all of a sudden developed. I did not have that before. Sensitivity to caffeine, definitely mentioned that. My stress resilience would absolutely plummet during my luteal phase. I was having so much trouble regulating myself. The smallest things were sending me into a tizzy emotionally. I was quick to cry, quick to get angry, quick to get frustrated. And just the internal somatic experience was like anxiety full tilt in my chest. And none of my tools were working. And it just got so hard to get through those days. Sleep issues, I mentioned, of course, trouble finding words. Oh my God, the brain fog. The brain fog. I was doing weird things as well that were not like myself, where I left my dog outside for way too long of a time than normal. And I was in absolute tears. The dog was absolutely fine. He was totally okay. Thank God he's a big dog. But I was very shaken after that. It still freaks me out even to talk about. I was having temperature regulation issues. Like, I don't think personally I've ever had a proper hot flash before, but still, like, there's certain waves where like I'm overheating for literally no reason. So maybe I am. Who knows? I mentioned that stress resilience plummeting during luteal, and this was another one in addition with the joint pain, that I had a panic attack during my luteal phase just a couple months ago. And I don't get panic attacks. I've probably had a total of 3 my whole life, and they're in extreme emotional moments. They're not a normal occurrence for me. So that was very, very concerning. The night sweats. What the hell? So frustrating. Like I said, I'm sensitive in my sleep already. So when I wake up drenched in sweat, it is so hard to fall back asleep. Along with the stress stuff during luteal, I started having this bizarre social anxiety happen for me, where it's not like I was dreading going out. And during the socializing, I had a great time, but there was this fallout afterwards where I was in like this internal crisis of like having said something weird, just having this like social hangover that just was not normal for me. My cholesterol kept climbing. And another wild symptom that I found out about that I'm like, oh my God, the way that this lines up is I had been diagnosed with advanced periodontal disease to the point where I needed 5 oral surgeries to help correct what was going on in my mouth. This like oral microbiome health was having real issues, and that apparently is perimenopause related too. So I booked the appointment with the doctor. I go in and I share this to plant a seed of hope of what else is possible, that we can have good doctor experiences, because I went in with my guard up, as I always do when I go to medical appointments, unless I have established rapport with somebody, which is rare. And I'm like, I am here basically to sanity check myself, because I've had these symptoms going on that I think are perimenopause, but I feel like I'm too young to be having this go on. And she's like, okay. So we dove into like family history, and I got to talk about all of that. And eventually she's like, okay, so what symptoms are you experiencing? And I pull out my phone. I pull up the list. I'm like, here you go. And she's like, okay, cool. I'm just going to look through these and basically translate them into the system for what like insurance calls them, kind of thing. And she goes one by one down the list, and she gets to the end, and she goes, this whole list, and she's like scrolling through it. She's like, this is all perimenopause. Like, I could cry thinking about it, because the experience of being validated by a medical professional, and especially her being a woman. And then she also shared that she was in such a similar spot at 41, and she's 43 now. And she's like, combined with HRT, and she's been working on her health, where she's released 100 pounds. She's like, I am in a completely different life than I was 2 years ago. And you're literally coming in with so much of what I was experiencing too. Just wow. Wow. So, with the combination of family history and things, she made an informed, decision of what recommendations to make. And so she started me on very, very low dose estrogen and low dose progesterone. And, you know, basically we're like going to check in 2 months. This was, by the way, last month that I started. Now, the timing of sharing about this, it makes me just a tiny bit nervous because typically it takes 3 or more months for hormones to, you actually to start feeling the benefit of them. My personal experience is that with starting both of those hormones, my joint pain in combination with getting better shoes, that plus the hormones, my legs feel so much better to the point where I'm back to consistent workouts, not only consistent workouts, but lifting heavy again. I am amazed. Now, I'm having to be patient with like some of the other symptoms, especially like how I'm feeling during my luteal phase. It's just, I feel like it's a trek into the underworld every time I go through luteal phase lately. And I'm laughing in that like sinister kind of laugh because if I don't laugh, I'll cry. My life is just so impacted by that time of the month now. And I'm blessed and privileged to say that that has not been the case prior to now. Patience and also continuing to take care of myself and eating whole foods, increasing fiber, getting my protein in, like all of the perimenopause and menopause basics that I now fold into my life. I'm going to continue focusing on that. And I'm really, really hopeful that the symptoms will continue to improve. So that is just the logistical piece. The profound part of this is that when it comes to the potentiality of how I get to live the rest of my life, because I have started HRT at 40 at the semi onset of a lot of them, because a lot of them happened last year. But I think about from like a lineage standpoint that at 40, 41, I get to have this hormonal support and it expands the possibilities of what I can create, what kind of quality of life I get to have, how with this information, I get to focus on my bone health. I get to focus on my brain health and how these hormones are totally in support of health in every area of my body. And, what's important about hormones to say is that like, it's not a magic bullet. It won't fix everything. So I'm obviously being very healthy about my expectations, but the hope of what becomes possible for the rest of my life to feel well, to feel strong, to feel clear-minded in building my business and making an impact in my creativity, in the way that I'm able to move and continue to move through my body. One of my greatest measures of like success and wellness and living a good life is being able to do physically whatever I want, whenever I want, whether it's like picking up kiddos and running around or lifting heavy, joining a friend for a workout, jumping from Pilates to dance to a hike to walking. I want that ability to be able to explore and use my body and just be present with life, really take it in and be able to show up to it. And when I think also about the mystery, the great mystery that it is of what women in my family also experienced through their menopause experience, I'm just now starting to have those conversations with them. Like there's different stories too, where like, one elder in my family didn't actually experience the physical menopause because they got a medical procedure in their uterus that like stopped bleeding because there was like excessive bleeding happening. But it makes me wonder of like, what were the mental health things that she was going through? Because knowing a bit about her story and her trajectory, like there was stuff going on, but she didn't have support around it at all. No therapist, no doctor asking and making sure that she's okay in this realm, at least. And wow, it just makes me wonder like if a tool like this, like hormonal therapy, and even like an overall culture that's talking about it, how would that have improved her experience, And then there's plenty more. I'm starting to have conversations with like women in my extended family or like my family through my marriage. And it's just, some of them don't even know what to say because they didn't know what was going on while it was happening. So the loud news flash of menopause is hot flashes, and that's the measure of it. It's hot flashes, and then you don't get your period anymore, and that's it. But there's so much. I just look at my own experience and like this list of symptoms at 40, and I don't have kids, right? And I don't have like a 40, 50, 60 hour a week corporate job. It's just like there's so many factors that go into it, but there's so much conversation not being had that women in my own life can't even name their own experience because there wasn't language for it. There wasn't a cultural openness. There wasn't just the awareness about it. And that's no fault of their own at all. But it is just this like great mystery. But also, I hold so much hope in the lineage healing that now becomes available through me not settling for this as my new normal. You know what I'm saying? I think maybe that's like the core of why I'm sharing this. Like, we don't need to settle for declining estrogen that wreaks absolute havoc in our bodies and therefore in our relationships, in our work, in our quality of life, and all of this leads towards our older years too. And settling for old age equating illness is something I am so entirely opting out of. That does not need to be true. There are too many incredible women, especially athletes in my life that I'm aware, that I have exposure to, that I'm like, oh my God, if they're able to do that without this kind of support, imagine what we can do over the next 40, 50, 60 years to live a good life, truly, in every sense of the word. I am almost certain that this will not be the last conversation we have talking about hormones, perimenopause, menopause. I actually intend on having many more of them. I think it's so important to continue talking about this. And my hope and prayer is that if you're listening and you heard something that was resonant for you, that you don't let it just stop when you hit end on the podcast. Let it be something that you reflect on and journal on and talk with your doctor about. Seek out other doctors. If you haven't had a good experience seeking out support for this, keep looking it up. Like, keep finding doctors that can help you. Keep talking about it with the women in your life and the people in your life. Dare to receive better. Dare to be met where you want to be met. And you deserve the support and the quality of life that you know is possible deep down. And I hope that you do not settle for this struggle and hardship that comes with these body changes. There's so much support that we can be seeking out. And I bet there, even between now and when you listen to this, I might be hearing and learning about more available options and more education around this. So let's keep talking about it. You absolutely deserve the world. And you deserve a life that when you look back on it, you feel so proud of and so good. So you inside of. I'll wrap with this. Part of softening the edges of how we regard ourselves and our body is opening up to the idea that we don't have to do this whole lone wolf thing anymore. And I know that the idea of looking for a doctor and jumping through hoops with insurance and all of the bullshit, okay? I know that that can feel really heavy on top of days that are just wall to wall busy. You're running a business, you're running a family, you're having relationships and having to cook food for yourself every day. It's just like there's so much going on in our everyday. But part of softening in how we regard our needs is to, one, acknowledge that we have them, that we are human, that we're not supposed to do this alone, and that we don't have to grin and bear it. We don't have to settle for these ideologies that got passed down. We can open up to the possibility of, what if it could be easy? What if the right doctor could just literally appear in my life? What if the people around me have these like secret keys to, these like ways into referrals or the phone chain, like one thing leads to another. But it starts with you and the intention inside of yourself that I deserve better, I deserve support, and I don't have to labor so hard for every need in my life. building infrastructure, building support team around you is absolutely possible and absolutely incredible to have. I can speak from experience, but it didn't just happen that way. I wasn't just born into that. I've had to fight really hard for that. But what ends up happening is that I have people around me that I can literally soften with. Oh, I don't have to manage their feelings. I don't have to manage what they need every 2 seconds. Like everybody's got their own center line in them to be able to know what they need and to speak up for what they need. Is it perfect? No. Are we working on it all the time? Absolutely. But make no mistake that your medical team is a part of your support team. And it is absolutely possible to have one at minimum, right? It's possible to have other support come in, and it doesn't also always have to come out of pocket. There's community resources available. There's free sessions, there's just all kinds of ways that if we soften our minds and soften our hearts to our needs and what we're literally calling into our lives, we allow more and more in. And you deserve that. Plain and simple. You deserve that care. You deserve that love. You deserve professionals around you that give a shit, that are savvy, and you deserve relationships in your life that nourish you from the inside out. Step by step, gentle with yourself. I can't wait to hear your wins. Just saying. May we know healthy hormones and all of the blessings that come with that. All right, my love, until next time.